Welcome to the webinar of the Legal Aid Committee of Government Law College, Mumbai. My name is Diksha Sharma and I am the Joint General Secretary of the committee. I would like to introduce you to the General Secretary of the committee, Ms. Dipadnya Valanch, along with the core team members, Ms. Riya Singhewar, Mr. Akshay Kardag, Mr. Abhishek Rajput, Mr. Rushikesh Agre, and Ms. Shireen Mistry. Government Law College Legal Aid Committee has varied and diverse activities. We provide pro bono legal services to those in need on matters related to civil and criminal law. We work to spread awareness in Mumbai on various current social legal issues. We organize NGO, Lok Adalat visits and prison visits where members meet prison inmates, analyze judicial department records, and draft bail application for the inmates. We also undertake Saturday visits where members of the committee volunteer to teach kids from underprivileged sections of the society. The committee comprises of 4 avenues: case managers, legal awareness and visits cell, outreach program, and logistics and marketing. Before we begin, I would like to inform to all the participants that none of them are allowed to raise a question, query, or speak in between the meeting. Please ensure that your mics are on mute and if possible, turn on your cameras for an interactive session. On this note, I would like to invite our guest speaker for today's evening, Ms. Parinaz Madan. An alumnus of St. Xavier's College, Ms. Parinaz Madan graduated as a lawyer from Government Law College, Mumbai in 2011. She was designated as a solicitor in 2014 after passing the highly competitive Solicitors exam conducted by the Bombay Incorporated Law Society. Ms. Parinaz has, among other academic awards, been the recipient of the Outstanding Pupil Trophy for her performance at the Maharashtra State Board SCC examinations. Ms. Parinaz started her career working in the corporate law team of Crawford Bailey and Company, a leading Mumbai-based law firm. Currently, she is a legal advisor to the Mahindra Group, an Indian multinational corporation, where she works on a host of corporate and commercial law matters such as drafting business policies, contracts, and legal opinions. She has also been a core team member for several mergers and acquisitions of the Mahindra Group. Ms. Parinaz joined iProbono as a member in 2016 and has counselled various NGOs on a host of education, child rights, and medical laws in India. In particular, she has drafted child protection policies for various organizations and recommended best practices for dealing with their child abuse cases. In 2020, she wrote one of the first definitive legal research papers on drafting effective child protection policies for civil society organizations in India, which was published on iProbono's website. She was recently consulted by representatives from UNICEF and Enfold India for her views on the draft of a state-level child protection policy in India. Apart from child rights, Ms. Parinaz has also written articles on various themes such as disability rights and feminism. Her articles have featured in BBC News, Business Standard India, Development Review, and Youth Ki Awaaz, among other publications. We welcome Ms. Parinaz Madan. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me to this talk, Diksha, and all the other members of the Legal Aid Committee at Government Law College. It's always a pleasure to interact with an enthusiastic bunch of students, but I think that feeling is a lot more elevated when they are students from your own alma mater. So welcome everyone and thank you for joining in today. Diksha and her team have very diligently compiled a list of questions that some of you had raised about the solicitor's exam, and I will try my best to address them in this session. In a nutshell, I plan to give you a brief background of the solicitor's exam and some tips on preparing for the exam, and importantly, how to write your exam paper in a manner that will help you succeed in these exams. You can move on to the next slide. Thanks, Diksha. But before I begin in true lawyer-like spirit, let me start this session with a disclaimer. The views and tips that I'm about to share today are entirely my personal opinions, and so they may or may not work for everyone. In fact, as you all probably know already, the solicitor's exams are an optional set of exams that you can choose to take after you finish your LLB degree. And they are certainly not everyone's cup of tea. So as you can see in this slide, there are heaps and heaps of books that you're expected to read in order to just attempt this exam. And what you're seeing in this picture is just a tiny little snapshot of what my life looked like during my study leave. If I recall correctly, there were at least 2 big laundry tubs full of books beyond what you see in this picture. So I don't think this is everyone's idea of fun. But I would also like to say here, I think this is important to mention at the outset that I have known an enormous number of individuals who have excelled as lawyers even without clearing the exam, or even without attempting the solicitor's exam. So I would like to stress on this. It is absolutely your prerogative to choose to take these exams up or to do something else like an LLM or to even stop at an LLB. That's fine, completely your choice. Now, if you choose to go down the road of taking these exams, I think there are a few fundamental things that you should know. The solicitors' exams are conducted in Mumbai, typically in the months of April, May, or October, November, by the Bombay Incorporated Law Society. I was told that the pandemic had thrown a spanner in the works and caused some amount of rescheduling, so you must check with the society about any revisions in the exam schedule. The exams consist of a set of 6 papers. The papers are mostly subjective in format. Of course, if you're lucky, they might throw in some objective questions also, but it's mostly subjective. And these papers test your knowledge, both practical and theoretical, on a wide range of laws. And these laws, to my mind, are extremely critical to ace your practice as a lawyer, particularly in the state of Maharashtra. As far as the scheduling of the exams are concerned, you can choose to give your exams in groups over here also. So for example, you can give 3 or 4 papers in one attempt, then give the balance in the next attempt. Or if you're brave enough, you can give everything in one shot. So you can reschedule it the way you want. However, completing 3 years of article clerkship with a solicitor who meets certain seniority criteria that are set out by the Bombay Incorporated Law Society is a prerequisite for appearing for these exams. I'm sure all of you must have heard about a similar system for the chartered accountancy exam. So you have this articleship. Now, during the course of the articleship, you are paid a stipend, and frankly, that may be much lower than the salaries your other peers earn at comparable law firms. But luckily, some firms are doing away with this kind of distinction. And even if you earn a measly amount, then I'm sure you'll more than make up once you qualify as a solicitor. Some of you had asked Diksha, where could one find articleship opportunities? Generally speaking, most traditional Mumbai-based law firms and a number of new age ones also who have solicitors routinely offer such opportunities for articleships. But I believe GLC's own placement committee helps out with article clerk placement. So you must keep your ear to the ground and see where such opportunities arise. Now, even in order to sign your articles, you must at a minimum have completed the first year of your 3-year LLB course or the 3rd year of your 5 years BLS LLB course. Generally, you get about 6 to 9 months of study leave for your exams. So the actual clerkship may not be much longer than 2.5 years. Now, you need about 50 marks out of 100 in each subject to pass. But do remember that you cannot qualify as a solicitor until you have scored 60% overall in aggregate. And you have a maximum of 6 attempts to accomplish this. Unless, of course, you re-sign your articles all over again to avail of another batch of 6 attempts. And while scoring a 60% may sound as easy as pie, it is actually quite an uphill task. So here you see the fail rate for Bombay solicitors spikes to 96%, but record numbers take tests anyway. Or the next article which says only 6% pass the latest solicitors exams. So you sort of get the drift of how difficult or competitive they are. So that really begs the question, why should anyone appear for this exam? What are its benefits? Why should anyone take up this seemingly impossible and mammoth challenge? So frankly, I don't want to gloss over or minimize the difficulties involved in taking the exam. But I truly believe that all things considered, taking the exams could be one of the most transformational events in your career as a lawyer. And you may ask me, why is that? So there are a couple of reasons. I'm sure there are a lot more, but I think there are 3 important reasons that you must know. Firstly, because simply going through the reading materials for the solicitor syllabus will make you much more conversant with the law than you would otherwise have been fresh out of an LLB program. Consider this. You have the opportunity to get a ringside view of key developments in some of the most important legislation in the state of Maharashtra by reading tomes and tomes of books and case laws. Think what wonders that can do for you as a professional, both in terms of your confidence and quality of work. So, while no one can guarantee that each of you attending this talk will qualify as a solicitor, I can definitely guarantee you this. You will emerge a much more proficient lawyer from the mere exercise of studying for this exam. The second reason is it serves as a prelude of sorts to the rigors of your work life as a lawyer in terms of the number of hours, scale of reading involved, and I truly believe that very few things in your life will phase you after you go through the drill of becoming a solicitor. At least that is the hope. And at a personal level, I thought it was a very good exercise in developing more resilience and sharpening my brain muscles to wrestle with complex legal issues that you practically face in your career. Now, the third reason, and that's probably the reason why a lot of you attempt it, certain law firms, particularly the traditional ones, and corporates in Bombay have very high regard for solicitors, and that is quite evident in the salaries and positions that solicitors command, even today. In fact, becoming a solicitor continues to be a prerequisite to reaching the level of a partner in some traditional Bombay-based law firms. Not in all law firms, but in certain law firms. But I must mention here today, and I think this was a question that was asked, is there any real differentiation between the work that a solicitor does versus the work an advocate does? No, on paper there is no real distinction. Now, slide 5, Diksha. Okay, so again, a very question which is asked very often: how do you prepare for the solicitor's exam even before your study leave? So definitely not like Mr. Bean in this picture, who's taking it very easy for a year before the exam. Typically, your study leave starts, as I said, 6 to 9 months before the exam date, depending upon the policies of your law firm. Now, nothing prevents you really from starting your preparations even before this period. Some firms have rotation policies for article clerks, where clerks are placed in one department, say, litigation, for a few months. Then they are transferred into another department, like general corporate, for a few months to expose the clerks to various subjects which will form part of the exam syllabus. Now, honestly, it's great if you can get that kind of diverse exposure. But I would not be too fussed even if you don't. I, for one, didn't work at a firm which had that kind of rotation policy, and my exposure was mostly limited to corporate laws. One of my batchmates who was attending the exam was working at an admiralty law firm, and that gave her no experience in any subject covered by the solicitor's syllabus. So I would say don't stress too much about this, about your firm not having these rotational policies, but leap at every opportunity that you get for conducting some legal research or agreement drafting or writing legal opinions, because that will go a long way in helping you prepare for the exam. Now, I'm sure all of you attending this talk know that this is a written exam. So clearly, at its core, the exam is evaluating you on the basis of your written skills. So it is very important for you to determine, very honestly, if you need to refine your writing craft. So say you're still in your 4th year or last year of LLB, which I'm sure a lot of you attending today are. You can also start honing your writing skills in anticipation of the exam. And today we are very fortunate actually to have access to plenty of courses, most of them free, on sites like edX, Coursera, on improving our written form. So take advantage of them. If you feel that legal writing is the area that you want to work on, you will be spoiled for choices for courses there too. Now, if you feel that you want to develop a better understanding of a particular area or facet of law, okay, which is covered in the solicitor syllabus, which you think that you're not going to get ample practice for, then you could take specialized online courses to bridge that kind of gap. And I can't emphasize this enough, but please participate in any opportunity you get to refine and showcase your writing skills. You could write for a college magazine, you could write for a credible newspaper or online blog, and there are a number of online forums who will accept pitches that offer a unique perspective on a legal issue or even a solution to a legal problem. And as for issues and problems, there is absolutely no dearth here. I mean, just walk down the streets of the city for a few minutes and I'm sure you will find something that animates you enough to write about it. So definitely write it, okay? And of course, related with that is cultivate a habit of reading good quality newspapers and legal blogs regularly, particularly in the time leading up to the exams. Now, you will notice that most of the subjects in the syllabus have some sort of current relevance, and you're sure to find some interesting developments in the newspapers about them. Reading legal blogs can give you a sense of how to address legal queries in a manner that is understandable and comprehensible to a layman. And this will help you immeasurably, not just for your solicitor's exams, but also in improving your writing skills as a lawyer. Now, I was told recently that the Bombay Incorporated Law Society has started organizing webinars, addressing some important and topical legal matters. And that, may be very useful in your exam preparations. And then, of course, beyond what the BILS does, you can readily access a number of YouTube talks of law firms or lawyers who are domain specialists in a particular branch of law that is relevant to your exam. Now comes a very important tip. It is to find a mentor who can guide and shepherd you through this whole exam process. And of course, you will have you'll have the solicitor that you have signed your articles under. But additionally, you should also seek the guidance of someone junior who is clear and can handle you throughout the preparatory phase of your exam. So I would say ask a mentor, what kind of books did she use? What question papers did she rely on? What study techniques she employed, etc. And I think that perspective will do you a wealth of good. About a year before the exams, I think it's also a good idea to start leafing through past year question papers. And you can find a ton of them on BILS's website. Diksha will insert the link in the chat box at a later stage. The next obvious step is to buy the prescribed books. So if your exams are in October, you could conceivably start buying your books in January and making notations in the books about frequently asked questions from past year papers. So if after going through all these question papers, I'm just giving you an example, you realize that there is a question on a concept called res judicata, which is basically section 11 of the Code of Civil Procedure. If you think it's been asked over and over again ad infinitum in the papers, you can definitely make a note next to that section in the Bare Act saying, short note on res judicata asked in November 2018 or October 2019 and so on. That way, during your study leave, you know that you have to concentrate specifically on certain sections of your Bare Acts. And I'm assuming that a lot of you already do this as law students, so it's probably not, really new for you. But doing this is very important for an exam like the solicitor's exam because you have a vast portion of study materials to go through. So you really need to know how to focus and orient yourself towards the important sections. Okay. Now, coming to the syllabus, you have 6 papers, 6 exams to study for. Diksha will share the revised 2019 syllabus with you, but I would highly recommend that before your attempt, you verify that the syllabus that Diksha has sent is the latest syllabus because there can be changes from time to time. The first paper that you see on your screen is Practice and Procedure, and that is your quintessential litigation paper. It covers not just the Code of Civil Procedure, but also the Specific Relief Act, Letters Patent, Bombay High Court Original Side Rules, drafting pleadings, etc. Then there are also certain articles of the Constitution of India, which are covered by the syllabus, like Article 32. Okay, and you're sure to find some seminal judgments in the papers from time to time, which deal with these constitutional articles. And you can see one on your screen from the Indian Express. Be warned. This paper can be a challenge, a huge challenge for those who are not familiar with litigation. But I would think this challenge is easily circumventable by studying smart and focusing on your past year papers. As a bonus, I would say if you can find someone who is actively involved in litigation, person need not even be a solicitor, just a lawyer, who knows the nitty-gritties of litigation and who you can pester with your queries from time to time. I think that would be an ideal situation, because this subject, that is practice and procedure, can definitely sound like Greek and Latin to hardcore corporate lawyers. And now, speaking of corporate lawyers, the next paper, of course, is company law. And that, I think, will come as a relief to those of you who have articled in corporate law firms like me, because the paper focuses on companies, legislation, and the insolvency and bankruptcy code. For this paper, you might want to invest some time in reading corporate law blogs to keep you abreast with the latest developments in the field. Now, coming to the next, and I think unequivocally the most dreaded paper, that is taxation law. But I think you don't have much to fret about if you focus on the frequently asked questions and latest developments in the field. Now, for example, we have all been reading with alarming frequency in the newspapers about retrospective taxation, tax avoidance, double taxation, in the newspapers. So if you can sprinkle some of these recent developments in your answer paper, it is quite likely that your examiner will be impressed. Now, let me come to the fourth paper, conveyancing, and it's absolutely no exaggeration to say that it is one of the lengthiest papers in your syllabus, because you may be asked to draft actual agreement templates in the paper, actual agreement templates, alongside answering other subjective questions. So one of your questions could require you to produce a whole gift deed, in your answer paper. And one of the standard books that are prescribed for this subject is Law and Practice of Conveyancing by Mr. Tijoriwala. And I will tell you that that book continues to be a staple in my everyday professional life, till today. Now, the fifth paper, and perhaps one of the most compact and tiny papers, is commercial law. It consists of contract, partnership, negotiable instruments, and sales of goods acts. And even though it seems like a compact syllabus, let not the size of the subject deceive you. In my attempt, I remember most people found it exceedingly difficult to pass this, seemingly easy subject. But I will say this, having a good understanding of these laws, these commercial laws, particularly contract law, will definitely aid you in your practice as a commercial lawyer. Now we come to the last paper, General Acts. Definitely not my favorite. Consists of a subset of a number of acts like laws on trusts, rent control, apartment ownership, limitation, arbitration, and a lot of other laws. And for this paper, I think students mostly rely on the bare acts and some landmark case laws. I will warn you here, you might be overwhelmed by the vastness of the syllabus for this paper, but most of these acts are quite easy to understand and study, at least in my experience. Next slide, please. Okay, so here I have pasted some recommended books that I was advised to study from by some very kind-hearted seniors, but this list is over a decade old and the syllabus has changed quite a bit since. So I do not recommend that you rely on this list. I just wanted you to see how well the senior has organized the preparations for the exam. So for instance, you see on the top, I know this is very small print, but you can see on the top, there is the Code of Civil Procedure. Party and Jhabwala has recommended books. Then moving to the next slide, please. Now, here you will see for general acts, the senior has mostly relied on bare acts. To my mind, figuring out where you will study from for this exam is quite a time-consuming exercise. So I advise you to either make or inherit a sheet of this nature before you actually start your study. Next slide. Okay, so when the pandemic started and we were all in lockdown mode, my father jokingly said, "You are already used to being indoors without any socialization for months on end because of the solicitor's exam. So this is not really new terrain for you." And I think that more or less sums up the rigors involved in the preparation leading up to the examination. So a lot of you may wonder, how should you really optimize your study? Well, that is a legitimate question, because perhaps for the first time in your lives, you will have 6 to 9 months to prepare for an exam. unless you've already appeared for a competitive exam of this nature, okay? And if it's your hobby to give competitive exams of this nature. So I think a lot of you must have heard of the tortoise and hare story in your childhood with the moral, slow and steady wins the race. Keep that in mind as you study for these exams. Having regular hours of studying every day. Now, it could be 6 hours for someone, it could be 8 hours for someone, 10 hours, 4 hours, whatever works for you. But also taking frequent breaks, remembering to eat and sleep along the way, maybe even having a hobby. Also, bear in mind that other people's lives are not going to come to a standstill just because of your studies, right? So your friends are going to get married, cousins will go on a vacation, and you will have a lot of distractions thrown at you, definitely. But you have to be the best judge of how to allocate your time in such situations. There's no need of going, I would say, to any kind of extremities. Personally, I've heard of a lot of intelligent students who overwork to the point of falling sick right before the exams. And this obviously does a number on their ability to perform well at the exams, howsoever well prepared they have been. And I have known of anecdotally at least, of some people who have shaved their hair off, some who have asked their parents to put morsels of food in their mouths as they study because they don't have the time to even eat. But I'm telling you, you don't have to go to those kind of extremes. And then we have people at the other end of the spectrum who will gladly leave all the studying to the tail end of the study, thinking, oh, 6 to 9 months, 5 months I'm going to enjoy myself, and the tail end I'm going to study. So no, I beseech you to not do that, because that could have catastrophic consequences unless your luck is strongly on your side. So I think, to sum up, everything in moderation, as our grandmothers used to wisely say, that should be your motto. I've discussed this previously. Focus intensely on past year papers, as they will be, an invaluable guide to what you could roughly expect in your exams. And skim read your commentaries and jhabwalas, but master your bare apps. And this is particularly useful for a paper like general apps. Now, the next thing is making Google Alerts your best friend. That is letting Google do the work for you. I still get Google Alerts on Supreme Court and Bombay High Court judgments, by the way, a decade since I had activated these alerts. So the minute you see a landmark case popping up in your inbox during the study week, you just make a note of it, use it in your answers, okay? And likewise, the same principle can be followed for newspapers or blogs. The moment you see something interesting, just make some notes and make sure that you are able to showcase that in your answer paper. Now, I want you all to guess for a second. What do you think will be one of the biggest challenges that you encounter as you actually sit down to write the exam? The answer may actually stump you. It is the inability to write fast, because now all of us are slaves to our laptops. We have lost the ability to do some, good old-fashioned paper writing. To minimize this problem, just make sure to write abundant notes during your study. Not only will these notes come in handy for last-minute revisions, but I think your arms will also get a good workout before D-Day. And the last point there is choosing a study environment that works for you. Now, for some, that could be the library, because some people think that unless they see other people studying, they will not feel enthusiastic enough to study. Then for others, it could be the comfort of the home, and I fall in that category, definitely. In terms of studying methods, a combination of writing notes and reading my notes aloud work very well for me. And yes, it may alarm you to hear this, reading aloud. Now, this habit has stuck with me until present date. So I don't recommend it for everyone. And I know it could be very harsh to your delicate vocal cords, and people around you may think you are a bit of a lunatic. But, reading aloud really helps you memorize and understand your text better. And I was actually quite emboldened to see this view reaffirmed in a recent BBC article. So Diksha, if you can just pull that up for us. Great. Numerous studies around the world have dubbed this phenomenon as the production effect, which means that producing written words, saying them out aloud, reciting them, actually improves our memory of them. And another benefit of work is that you won't go to sleep or doze off when you're on your study leave. So I recommend it, but do it at your own peril. Another thing that I wanted to say here is, I'm going to forewarn you, you're going to go through a whole gamut of emotions during your study. So one day you will feel euphoric. Oh, I made so much progress in my studying. And the very next day you may have a sinking feeling saying, oh my God, I'm never going to complete this portion. I'm not going to do this exam. And I will attest to this. All of these feelings are completely normal. Everyone goes through it. Almost everyone at least goes through it. What you should ideally do in situations like these is take a few deep breaths, calm down, say to yourself that you are going to give this your best shot. And I don't think any sensible or reasonable-minded person will judge you harshly, even if you end up failing the exam. I mean, everyone knows what these exams are like at the end of the day. The one thing that I would like to stress on, especially to all the young lawyers who are here, young students who are here, resist the temptation of not giving the exam at all. Because if you have come all the way through your study, if you have gone through the whole procedure of becoming an article clerk, doing your study leave, getting all the books, give the exams one shot, right? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You will fail, but at least give it your best shot. And I would like to say here, comparison is poison. So some people will tell you, oh, you must do 4 readings before the exam. Some will do 5. I have done 2, and that works. So it does not matter. Don't start comparing your study habits with others. Just trust your gut and do what works best for you. Now, the million-dollar question on every student's mind is, how do you distinguish your solicitor's answer paper from the hundreds who attempt the exam? And I will admit here, see, my knowledge of the specifics of the solicitor's exam may be a little dated and rusty, but there are a few tips and tricks for writing a good exam paper that have stayed with me over the years. First of all, once you receive your question paper, resist the temptation of scribbling your answers out immediately. Okay? Not a good idea. Skim through your question paper first for a minute or 2. Take a considered look at the questions and then think, which of the questions displayed in this question paper carry the most amount of marks? And also allow me to showcase what I know in great depth to the examiner. And you must, I would say, plan this strategically so that it sets an excellent first impression and tone for the rest of the paper. Now, the second point, analyze the question asked. It may sound very simplistic, but I will tell you this, most people, in order to answer hurriedly, misunderstand the question, entirely misunderstand the question. And this is particularly true in situational problems. So I would say please avoid that, because doing something like that would prove fatal to your chances of success. Okay? Now, the third point is remember to cut your coat according to your cloth. What that means in the context of answering the solicitor's exam paper is that you should allocate time to answers depending on the marks assigned to a particular question. So it is completely unfruitful and wasteful to write a 10 pages answer for a question that only carries 2 or 5 marks and then be left with the time to only write a little, tiny half-page answer to a question that carries 20 marks, right? So use your time wisely and productively, because time will be an extremely scarce commodity when you're attempting the paper. And as I discussed earlier, careful note-taking, diligent and consistent writing practice will definitely go a long way in ensuring that you stay within the time limits prescribed for answering a paper. Now, fourthly, and this relates more to the quality of your answers, write your answers in a coherent and structured fashion. Proofread your answers whenever you get the opportunity to, in order to weed out any grammatical and language errors. Personally, I have found answering in point form to be a very effective way of demonstrating my knowledge on a particular question. So I'm just giving you an example. If there's a question on what is a gift under the Transfer of Property Act, I would first use the first few points to break down the definition of gifts, then follow it up with an interesting point that I found in a commentary or even a jhabwala on gifts, and then conclude the answer with a case law or 2 in my final points. Now, if you're blessed and you have the memory of an elephant, you could even try to impress the examiner by writing out a complete case law citation with dates and page numbers. But please don't do all of this and be overzealous when your question only carries 2 marks. Otherwise, such over-enthusiasm can also be viewed as a case of misplaced priorities by the examiner. Okay. This slide shows you a small screenshot of the conveyancing paper from 2019. Now, I know again the print is very small here, but as you can see, the first few questions are pretty straightforward. You can see they are like one sentence, very easy to answer. What is a gift? How can it be effected? So something you can readily infer from a bare reading of the Transfer of Property Act, right? But question 4, as you can see, is a long situational problem. And that tests not only your memory of the bare act, but also your practical and application skills. And I will warn you here in the conveyancing paper, you will more often than not find such questions. So brace for that. Okay, so that really completes my presentation, and I really hope, much like the squirrel which is depicted in this picture, you will have your life back after the exam. In sum, I think I would like to say that don't view the exam in the sense of trepidation or dread. Instead, shift your focus on how it will help you better your craft as a lawyer holistically. Okay? One of my mentors had very rightly said that years down the line, after you appear for the solicitor's exams, you may not remember the section number of a legislation or particular case law that you studied when a client comes up with a legal problem. But at least you will know which laws to consult and investigate to solve your client's problem. So essentially, his message was, you will know where to look to find solutions to a legal problem that your client is faced with. And as I mentioned at the start, even if you don't end up getting the solicitor's tag, you will definitely become a much more proficient lawyer. And to my mind, that in itself will be a huge achievement for you. Okay, over to you now, Diksha.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was such a detailed and intrinsic presentation. Thank you so much for putting in a lot of effort. I just had one question. Could you, like I already mentioned in the beginning, that we as a legal aid committee are indulgent to pro bono work also, where we collect and look for clients who are in need of legal assistance. And we also are looking for a pool of lawyers who would want to render such services. So could you please highlight also that what is the importance of a pro bono work as a legal profession, since you have been a part of pro bono work for a really long time?
Okay, so that's a good question. To my mind, and this is my personal opinion, performing pro bono work is one of the most enriching professional and personal experiences for an advocate. And why is that? Because it exposes you to fields of law that you would not ordinarily encounter in your commercial practice. Okay, that's one. The second and very important factor is that it offers you an illuminating glimpse into the problems which are plaguing our country. Okay, and it nudges you to think out of the box and provide unique solutions to these kind of problems. And I think at a personal level, it makes you a much more empathetic individual, and also at the same time giving you a healthy dose of humility, because more often than not, you are likely to deal with resource-strapped organizations, and they don't have the bandwidth really to implement all your legal solutions. Even if your legal solutions are very, sound or on very good legal footing, they just don't have the resources, the bandwidth. So it's not just enough to give legal advice, but you have to make sure that your advice is actually viable and implementable. And I think when a lot of people think of pro bono work, they typically imagine a lawyer in a robe arguing vociferously before a court for a client's rights. And I would say while that is one facet of pro bono work and a very important one, there are numerous other forms of pro bono work which are often overlooked. So you could be doing very meaningful pro bono work even as a non-litigator, without stepping in a court of law. For example, providing legal advice, counseling on laws governing the non-profit space in India, foreign contribution, taxation. And all these laws can be quite a complicated maze for an ordinary NGO to navigate on its own. Now, if you think you're passionate about environmental rights or animal rights or child rights or women's rights, there are many avenues for you to explore there as well. And I remember reading as per a 2015 article in the Indian Express, there were about 31 lakh NGOs in our country, okay, 31 lakh. And to give you some context, that is more than twice the number of schools in our country in that year, in 2015. Now, I'm sure as a lawyer, you can find that one NGO that you can be useful to among the vast pool of NGOs in the country. And it's not just NGOs, you can offer pro bono services to individuals or families who need legal support, but have financial constraints or resource constraints for approaching lawyers. And to all the students here, at least who are attending this talk, I would highly encourage you to explore pro bono opportunities for legal work with your in-house legal aid committee. And I'm very sure that you will find something worthwhile to immerse yourself in.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the presentation. We really thank you for coming in here and presenting this. I would like to invite Mr. Padnya Valanj, the General Secretary of the committee, to propose a vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Diksha. I would like to extend my gratitude towards Ms. Parinaz Madan to take out her valuable time for such an insightful session. We couldn't have asked for more. How much ever I thank you for this, it won't be enough. We all, even I'm a final year student and I aspire to be a solicitor. There are so many things under the roof. We hear different stories, some myths, there's so many things under the sun when we talk about solicitors exam, and you very rightfully summarize everything and put it forward in a manner in which is going to be helpful for generations to come. Thank you everyone who helped to organize this event, all the participating members, volunteers, Diksha especially. Kudos to you for organizing such an insightful event. Again, at the end, I would like to say, Parinaz Madam, we really adore your work for legal aid pro bono services, and it is an inspiration for all of us. For someone to look at someone who balances her legal professional work and pro bono services at the same time. Thank you very much for the kind of person that you are, and continue to be so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Just for all that we have recorded this session, we'll be putting it up on a YouTube channel after a few days. Thank you so much for joining in. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you everyone.